Guy Hills is the embodiment of positivity and good vibes. I'm not kidding. I was re-listening to our discussion before I started recording this intro, and I was shocked at the timing. Look, I think we all know these are some strange times happening right now, and just hearing Guy's voice and outlook warmed my heart. It did. When you hear this, or even see an image of Guy, you will completely understand. He's just a happy person, but someone who's hit the wall a few times. But he's so positive, it caused me to ask myself, how can we all think a little bit more like him? My name is Jeremy Kirkland, and this is Blamo, a podcast exploring the world of fashion with the people who shape it. My guest this week is Guy Hills, fashion photographer and co-founder of Dashing Tweeds. We chat about the challenges and joys of life as a creative professional, photographing Savile Row for the internet age, collaborating with Converse and Pharrell, and wearing what you love regardless of what anyone else thinks about it.
Guy Hills, thanks for chatting. How are things?
Excellent. Just been in New York with the brand, with Dashing Tweeds for the last couple of days, and it's been excellent. Yeah, meeting people who could be potential agents. I get stopped in the street all the time when I'm wearing this crazy bright coat. And I've been to the Premier Vision fabric show. Been to a couple of menswear shows. Yes, had a great time.
Yeah, you are like a perfect example of someone who truly embodies the joy of clothing.
I set up the whole brand really just because I love clothes so much, and I just couldn't get enough. You know, it's kind of addiction, isn't it? And you get you want a stronger and stronger doses. And then I got to a stage where I was just had this idea in my head of wanting to really explore some interesting colors to wear and patterns and So the whole brand was set up around my desires.
Yeah, I mean, I think from the first time I met you, you've always had, this, and I say this in loving compliments, this flaneur, wonderful sort of, like incredibly detailed looks that you've had. But the funny thing is, from meeting you and spending time with you, you're probably the most disarming and laid back person I've ever met. It's fantastic.
That's nice to hear.
Yeah.
I my philosophy is just to enjoy myself and take life as it comes. But I think actually my father was well dressed, and we had a next door neighbor who was in the music industry, and he would sort of always be buying new clothes. This was in the 70s, and cast off kind of crazy, colorful 70s clothes, which I would sort of pick up and start wearing. So
really?
There was this real fascination from the beginning of just exploring the depths of what clothes had to offer.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure where it actually came from, but I've just always liked dressing up.
Because you're London born and raised?
Yeah, I'm very parochial. I've lived in the same square mile all my life. In fact, I now live just around the corner from where I went to prep school when I was like 10. So I sometimes bump into friends who I haven't seen for years and years in the same area. It's quite fun.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and then I just went to school at Westminster, which is one of the big London schools.
Yeah.
So I lived in the same area, and now actually my shop I've opened, it's just a stone's throw from my family home. So
So why is that? Have you ever had a desire to live other places?
And I've travelled a lot around the world, but no, I think I'm just sort of like the area of London. Yeah. I mean, I think I'm quite parochial. Really. Just quite obviously, I love travelling, seeing new views of things, but happy. Well, actually, when you're in the nicest bit of London and everything is available, then there's no reason to move, really.
Yeah, well, I was going to say welcome to every New Yorker. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Because you come from basically a family of collectors, but also of extremely highly trained professionals, right?
My father was an architect. Both my brothers are in architecture. My mother was a journalist. My grandmother and my aunt, her sister, were in the art world. Actually, she was a curator at the Met Museum here.
Oh, wow.
She was worked in Renaissance jewels, and she wrote lots of books all about really detailed books on Renaissance jewelry and looking at hat pins in Renaissance paintings and finding the real objects. And then my grandmother collected snuff boxes. Her father was
snuff boxes.
Yeah, snuff boxes.
Oh, wow. Okay, so just for people who know, a snuff box is like that's where you put your tobacco. That's where
powdered tobacco, which you snort. Actually, I find it quite funny that vaping has taken off, because when they banned or tried to get rid of cigarette smoking, I thought that snuff may
make a
come back.
resurgence there.
Yeah, actually, I've got a fact. You're like, that expression "toffee nose."
Yes.
Which someone's got their nose stuck in the air. Apparently, it's when people used to snuff is brown. So when people used to snort snuff, and it's just powdered nicotine, they'd end up with a little bit of snuff brown stuff stuck on the end of their nose.
Really?
And they'd normally be wearing their stiff collars and their head would be up, so they'd be kind of quite arrogant. And that's where the toffee nose expression apparently comes from.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So your grandmother was collecting snuff boxes.
Well, her father was a big art dealer, and then she just loved collecting. When I was young, she said, "You've got to start collecting something like silver spoons or stamps or something."
What was the first thing you started collecting?
Actually, I'm not a great collector at all. I mean, I have got a great collection of clothes, but I'm not kind of full of objects. But then she would show me all her snuff boxes, and some had eye miniatures in and beautiful hinges, and some go right back to William and Mary, and
oh my Lord.
Some are made out of, I've got one, a wooden one, I've inherited some of them, made out of Mary Queen of Scots' bedpost. So there's a lot of history. Actually, I've got one, a scrimshaw one, made out of whale bones by prisoners of war in Napoleonic times, and they would chisel away a bit of whale bone and make it into a little snuff box. So I was fascinated by the story and then touching things and just the sort of stuff.
Yeah, there's something that happens, and we don't have to go down this rabbit hole, but there's definitely something that happens when you physically engage with an object, when you physically touch it, no matter what it is. Where, I mean, even for me, I was just in London not too long ago, and going to some of the museums and stuff, like all I wanted to do was touch it, and for clothes too, especially. Sometimes you look at it and you're like, okay, but then when you feel it, you have a better understanding of the history behind it, the luxury that, I don't know why that is. I mean, maybe some sort of other sensory activation.
I think there's nothing more personal than something rubbing against your skin, So
that's fair enough.
So the texture of clothes, I totally love the fact that you can change clothes and have a totally different feeling. And the feeling's obviously emotional by looking in the mirror, seeing what you look like. But it's also physical, if you're wearing different silky materials, cotton materials, woolen materials, it really does have an effect. In fact, funny enough, I was just reading an article. I did a science degree, actually, so I always
that's right, biology, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
At Bristol University. But I get a subscription to New Scientist and other science things. But there's interesting articles saying that actually people are losing their sense of touch and texture at the moment because all the surfaces you touch, all the iPods and things are smooth. And we're living in an increasingly smooth world. So it's quite interesting that if you actually just think of every day, how often do you touch something like sandpaper or really kind of woolly clothes or anything? And it said there's becoming an increasing phobia of holes and things with different textures because we're living in a more hygienic, shiny world.
Yeah.
Interesting fact. But yeah, clothes instantly is the first thing you do. Have you heard of that expression, the Yorkshire handshake, when you meet sort of tailors, where they rather than they shake your hand, but the first thing they do is they want to touch your clothes. So they grab the lapel of your jacket. I can do it here on the microphone. You hear this kind of rustle, and they give you a Yorkshire handshake, which is basically rubbing the lapel of your cloth to see how fine the worsted is. It's quite interesting.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
So you're younger, you're growing up next door to you is some sort of musician who's basically giving you his like hand.
Yeah, he was like an A&R man, but he was kind of one of those people who were just dressed up, fantastic 70s clothes, and he'd hand me these bonkers that prog rock kind of style of colourful jumpers and jackets, and I would I can remember merrily kind of just trying them on, experimenting, that whole thing that happens when you're at that age, trying to find your style, looking in the mirror.
Right.
And then I remember going to school and everyone sort of laughing at me saying, you look different. And then actually just thinking I didn't really care. I had this no desire to particularly conform, and then was just enjoying. And I wasn't really actively trying to go against the grain of everything. It was just thinking, I love this. Personally, I'm going to wear it and enjoy it no matter what anyone else thinks. That's the kind of... I'm not quite sure. I actually haven't really analysed it that much when it occurred. But yeah, it's just almost a devil-may-care attitude of just as long as I like it, I don't really care what anyone else thinks.
Yeah, which is kind of a rare thing, especially in an adolescent age in which a lot of people, you just want to be accepted. And here you are just, all... And it sounds like you're just the happiest, just going your own way.
Yeah, just if I could, I was given appreciation through all my parenting of beautiful things. And if I found something beautiful, then that was enough. I didn't really feel I need the ratification of other people to say whether it was right or wrong. But interestingly, jumping years and years to a story, then I didn't actually realize how rare that was, because you start creating stuff for a shop, and then there are people who come in and like it, but then you think there's so few men who aren't sheep. There's so few who just think, I like this, I'm going to wear it and enjoy it. 99% of them. So I discovered kind of as financially it was difficult. It was in the beginning. So few men just think, I love this, I'm going to wear it, I don't care what anyone else thinks.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter what it is, because I always find it funny. In the 1970s, everyone was wearing brightly coloured ties, so you'd see the newsreader with brightly coloured huge kipper ties reading the news, because he was conforming with what everyone else was wearing. So the funny thing is, it doesn't really matter what it is, as long as you all look like the same as everyone else, then it's fine.
Fair. So, you go to school, you study biology, but before this, you were, kind of like this budding photographer, right? I mean, when you were like 17, you go away to Australia?
That's right. Yeah, exactly. I got really into photography at school and just fascinated by the magic. I set a darkroom up the other day for my kids, and I just
That's fantastic.
Yeah, which is great. I rekindled the magic, and with the red light and the black and white and the pictures coming out, and my heart was beating fast, watching the image come out. And I said to my kids, "Isn't this amazing?" And they said, "Yeah, whatever." They're just surrounded by imagery nowadays. But at the time, photography, when I first did it at school, and then an image came, I was just absolutely amazed by the instant creativity of being able to take a picture and develop it yourself, and something magical to appear. Yeah, making something like that.
But to continue doing it, I mean, because you had quite a knack for it. So, like, just so listeners are aware, how did you get the opportunity to do this Australian trip?
So I left school, and actually my mother was a journalist, so she bought a camera. She was always writing stories, and they'd send a photographer to cover the story. Then my mother thought she'd get a camera and start taking pictures. And I was fascinated with photography, and just started doing it at school. And so I'd borrow her camera and while I was on stories and take pictures for her. And then she was always taking them to be developed, thinking, the pictures you took were a bit better than my ones, and they'd get printed in newspapers. And then I thought I could earn some money. I decided to take a year off between school and university. So I just instantly became a press photographer and started working for PR companies and newspapers, and just took pictures and then rushed back. And I totally undercharged myself. So I was,
welcome to the world of being an entrepreneur. You're like, I don't know. How much would you pay?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So then I was earning a little bit of money being a photographer, but I really wanted to travel. And there was this society called the Fairbridge Society, and they were sending kids ages ago to Australia. But they had this award, this grant, which I then applied for, and I did a photo essay of my life in Australia, and they sent me off to a sheep farm. It was quite funny, actually. I didn't know I'd spend all my time with wool later on, but I was on this big sheep farm in near Perth, and chasing sheep around on motorbikes and shearing them, and it was great fun.
And then just documenting it all.
And then I just did a whole photo essay. I was taking pictures all the time. I was looking at photographers I admired, like Cecil Beaton and Bailey and Norman Parkinson. I know I was just sort of really exploring photography, taking lots of pictures, but then I was constantly snapping. I had an old Rolleiflex as well by that time.
Right.
So I was sort of documenting things, trying to take beautiful pictures. So it was almost like a real passion that I was exploring. Yeah.
Well, it's pretty rare that someone's passion also is something they're good at. You know what I mean? And I don't say that to belittle anyone, but
I know exactly what you mean, because I've been trying to learn to sing, and I'm definitely not good at doing that.
Yeah. It's just like, you're into photography, but you're actually good enough at it that you're being validated by being, printed in newspapers. And
yeah, I guess I was quite lucky. And then I really wanted to get into being like a fashion photographer. I just thought it was days before digital. So it was such an interesting time, because it was really glamorous being a photographer then, and being able to create an image. It seemed to sum up everything I was interested in. I love making things, like doing things with my hands, something physical, but also creating a fantasy which could come into reality. And that's exactly what photography was for me. And well, the documentary stuff was fine, but I like the idea of thinking of something magical and making it a reality in a photograph. So after my degree, which I did without a kind of focus on becoming a biologist, it was just more for the fun of university. I immediately started working as an assistant to some fashion photographers in London.
Okay.
And learning the tricks of the trade.
And how was that?
Oh, it was great fun. Yeah, it was the tail end of the absolute golden era of photography in the early 90s. And it was still something really cool about being a photographer. There were 24-hour labs all around London. There's no digital images anywhere, no telephones. It was hard to imagine those times. So just having a picture was something, a beautiful print of a photograph was something special that people really looked at. And I worked for these photographers. I signed up for this. It was quite hard. It's quite competitive. So I spent a lot of time cold calling, signed up with this company called the Association of Photographers that had a rota of assistants, and then big advertising and fashion photographers would need someone to help, and they would go through the list. And so then it was good fun. I would just get last minute calls. It was always last minute. And then a photographer would need an assistant, and you'd go off and be on a film set photographing Catherine Zeta-Jones or Bill Gates. I remember helping to photograph, and Arnold Schwarzenegger, and other film stars. So I kind of learned a lot of the skills. Actually, one of the first jobs I had was a big advertising shoot, and it was for Heineken, and it was a huge studio. It had 3 horses, 30 people, a couple of dwarfs, some snakes and tents, and everyone was wired up with a wire down their arm and a little light bulb. They were holding a glass of beer with the light bulb that shone through it. It was all, no the retouching you see now, and the effects didn't really exist, and everything had to be done in one shot in a huge 10:8 camera. Yeah, it was exciting stuff.
That's incredible.
Yeah, good fun.
And you're like, you're getting all of this like thrown at you. But what's interesting to jump back 1 second, just the idea and the will and the drive to do something like that and feel confident enough to put yourself out there is a really, really big and bold thing.
Well, that was a thing that actually my mother taught me, because she was a freelance journalist, and anyone who has a passion and then wants to try and make some money out of it has to get through this block of just the marketing side of things.
Yeah.
So when you're really young, and then the whole cold calling and just chasing, and it was competitive to try even get your foothold in, was really tricky. And then when you get something, you have to realize that if you get a job and they're paying you, it may not be your dream job, but it's a step. So the first thing I got was problem page photos. We have to start somewhere, and it was for one of those really cheap magazines, Woman's Own. It was called.
What's a problem page photo?
A problem page photo is getting a girlfriend of mine at the time to sit on the end of the bed with my dad and have her head in her hands going, "Oh my God, I'm sleeping with an older man. What do my friends think?"
So you're staging these things?
Yeah, I had to stage them.
That's amazing.
But I was getting paid 30 quid a day as an assistant, and then I'd get paid £200 for one of these staged photographs. And they were just put in the problem pages of magazines. It was quite funny. But then all of a sudden I was a photographer, I was earning money. And then what I would do is, this was part of a big group called IPC Publishing, and they had a huge tower block full of all the magazines. Mm-hmm. So once you get through security, which was notoriously tough because all these people were trying to show their portfolios, but once you were working for the magazine, you're in the building, and then they had all sorts of other glamorous magazines. So then I would accidentally get lost and walk onto the wrong floors all the time with my portfolio, and then just walk up to the picture desk and just sort of introduce myself and try and get more jobs. So in the same building there was a teen fashion magazine. I can't remember the name. Ms. It was called. And there was this amazing girl I bumped into in the lift, and I said I was a fashion photographer, and I had barely shot any fashion by that time. So then she gave me this break and started photographing young girls dancing around in Brighton, I think the first shoot was. And then actually the first shoot was quite funny because it was bucketing down with rain, and it was the worst weather ever. And she was saying, okay, we've got to cancel the shoot, we're going to turn back. And it was like a break. It was my first fashion shoot. And I said, no, we can't do that. We'll all go out. And the models, who are these young 16-year-old girls, were going, you got to be kidding. It was proper full-on gale and storms. And I said, no, we're going to do it. So I had my assistant, had a light. I had a kind of style which was very using lighting outside and quite vivid, and I was shooting on colour. And we went outside, and the girls just couldn't believe they were out in these wild conditions. They were laughing their heads off, and I was getting blown over, and they had a bag of chips. And the picture's just so good because there was nothing false about them. And their models were just genuinely kind of just totally amused that they were being blown away on the beach. And that was such a great shoot that as soon as it was published, I got loads of other people ringing me up saying, I've seen these brilliant pictures in this magazine. Can you do some more stuff? So yeah, it's a real lesson that just persevering, and once you've got your foot in the door, just doing whatever it takes is a good way to start.
Well, whatever it takes is the key right there. And because I think, not that I'm some expert or anything, but people will often ask me, and it's like, hey, how do I get to here? Or, or I'll talk to other people, and here is a place where like that equals success, or that equals no compromise. Maybe that's a better phrase. And I think a lot of people forget all of the different steps a creative or an entrepreneur takes to get to a point and to where they fear they have to compromise, or to where they don't have to compromise at all, or compromise very little to create their craft and make something successful. And maybe some of it has to do with the fact that we're in a world where so much of what people see we do is really like curated by the person that's showing them, where it's like, oh, actually all I do all day is I sit and I talk to fancy people and I hold microphones and then I get in private cars, and it's like, no, I also have to try to get paid and I have to try to do this.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's a good point, the idea of just starting out with a view to becoming big, but then being content with where you are. Because you meet loads of people and they don't even want to put the hard work in. They just want to go straight to the top. But I think in the digital world, there's so much digital stuff, then people think they can bypass it more easily. Whereas in the tailoring world, you get people who start at college and they start as an apprentice, and they realize they've really got to put the work in before they get anywhere.
Yeah. And also the drive to accept something, because you weren't like, hey, I'm going to be a fashion photographer and my first shoot is going to be the front cover of, I don't know, Q or Rolling Stone or whatever like that. It sounded like you were going to any place and you're saying, hey, this is me, give me a shot, let me try to do something.
Yeah, absolutely. Because the passion's inside you, isn't it? So it's if you're doing something that you love and you've got a kind of vision, in a way it doesn't really matter what it is you're doing to start off with, as long as you're doing something that you really enjoy. So even if it's for a beginning teen magazine with the circulation of 17-year-olds, or actually 13-year-olds, I think this one was. But if you're doing it and you're doing your best and you're trying to fulfill some inner desire, then that's a good start.
Yeah.
You can't really you can't ever think through the process feel that you're not happy with what you're creating.
Yeah.
If you're a creative.
Yeah.
I think though, if I look at my old shots when I started out, and then look at other shots, they stand on their own, no matter what the what the market is.
Yeah. Do you still shoot?
Yeah, I shoot all the advertising for the brand, and that's the thing I like now for the Dashing Tweeds brand is creating, because I created the brand from scratch, and the brand, what it is when you see it, but you can identify. You can identify it very quickly from looking at the images I've created. The idea of giving more color and texture to men, and just sort of fulfilling this gap that I've sort of identified in the market.
Yeah. And this, and for Dashing Tweeds too, and like this wasn't something that it was always the goal to create Dashing Tweeds. It were, I worked my fingers till they bled to create this thing. Because it sounds like this kind of happened from a photography assignment, right?
It's a personal voyage. The whole it does start. I guess the journey starts when you're a teenage boy looking in front of the mirror, going, "Who am I? What I want to be?" And then you're not quite sure, and you say, "Let's experiment with this. Let's experiment with that." So I think the whole of I've never really had that big division between career and my life. So I've been very, very lucky to embody my personal journey of discovery and creativity and be able to turn that into a brand rather than, as you were saying, thinking here's an end goal, let's just try and get to it. I think it's a process of evolution of these ideas.
How do you stay happy at every part of your life? Because I think that's something that I wrestle with a lot.
I didn't come from a happy family. My parents got divorced and they were fighting all the time and throwing things at each other. Jeez. So it was, it didn't grow up. My first early days weren't that happy. But I was trying to shrug it off. But that's not really the point. I think the point of being happy is just being if I feel there's a creativity inside me and I like making things, and as long as I'm making something or doing something that I think is good or could potentially get better, or there's a beginning of a journey and you could see the progress, then there's nothing that makes you happier than doing that. So if I was stuck in isolation, not being able to communicate with people and not having any ideas, then I'd become totally miserable.
Same here.
But I feel that there's always something I want to explore or do. I feel sorry for people when I meet them and you say, what do you want to do? And they say, I've got no idea. I say, there must be some idea. And they go, no, I've got nothing. And, they're going to end up being miserable. Or some of those people are miserable. And then you say there must be something. But for me, there's always been like a feeling inside of something that I want to experiment with, improve, create. And you just do one step towards creating something, and then you look at it and you go, that's not bad, I could probably do better, but that's made me happy, I'm gonna have another go and that'll make me happy. So I think that's very important, to be true to yourself, and to constantly for me, just to constantly kind of create things and enjoy them.
Right. So you jump back, you're shooting for magazines, and you're shooting for bigger and more fancy magazines.
Yeah, I got to doing some really great shoots. Yeah, I was shooting for Jaguar magazines and Cartier, and had amazing shoots with beautiful models around the world. And I was a main photographer for this Quintessential magazine, which is a lifestyle thing. Had a regular column clubbing around the world with Freddie Windsor. Would go clubbing in Moscow and Beirut, and then I'd be shooting crazy fashion stories. Yeah, it was great fun. But then I got married. I had to cut my honeymoon short by a couple of days because I was offered a big shoot for Range Rover in LA, which was good fun. My wife wasn't that impressed.
It sounds like you married the right person then.
Yeah, my wife's amazing. Yeah. That's the best thing about being at university was having met her.
That's awesome.
That was one of those. Well, that was just a romantic love story. I just saw her the first day at university sitting on the window of this hall of residence, and she was on this first floor window, and just literally love at first sight. But she wasn't interested in me at all. So that was.
I know that feeling.
That took quite a long time. That story.
So you get married, and you're now kind of trying to alter your career a little bit in terms of your
absolutely.
travel.
So then I had another fashion shoot for 3 weeks in Rio, and the bus would turn up with models and stylists, and we'd go, let's go off. We're going off to Rio, and I'd jump down the house with a massive smile on my face and say bye to my wife, and she'd say, at least you can pretend not to smile. And so I was kind of saying, bye, see you in 3 weeks. Actually, on that particular shoot, she came out.
I was going to say, there you go.
Which was fun. But then, we had a great. We got married and then got pregnant on the honeymoon. So kids are on their way pretty quickly.
Oh wow!
So I was thinking, and my wife is a top lawyer, so she's working really hard. She was made actually partner of a law firm in the same month as well. So it was very busy.
Wow.
Very, very, very busy month. And so I was thinking that all this traveling was not going to work. And actually, tell you the truth, there was a change in the digital photography had just come in. Magazines were paying less. The work I was doing at that level of fashion, it wasn't like Vogue top covers. It was commercial work. So I was shooting Mail on Sunday, You Magazine. Well-paid, fun commercial fashion, doing stuff for Tatler. But it was becoming quite samey. It's just the same stuff. And then there was a real realization. I didn't actually realize it for years and years. I thought I was photographing beautiful girls on beaches. It only really occurred to me that I was selling bikinis after a long time. So I kind of had enough of that.
Yeah.
Photography was my passion. So I was looking for some work in London, and I was actually walking down Savile Row and I bumped into Andrew Bolton, who's now a curator at the Met costume department. And he had just been speaking to Anna Rowland, who owned Anderson and Sheppard. And she was particularly clever because she had a career in marketing for Dior, I think it was.
Yeah, she was doing at the Estee Lauder and Lauder.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And which is the toughest marketing you can get, because the product's inherently worthless. Yeah, and it's all marketing. So she'd come to Savile Row and she really shook up the whole place. And it was a hard time because the rents were going up. I mean, there's a real change at that. This was about 10 years ago, and Savile Row was really not up to speed with the digital revolution. So there was no websites. There were a few charlatans who said they were Savile Row tailors and had quite a high ranking on the websites, who'd just been assistants at Savile Row. Yeah, so Anna was really wanting to say, right, we've got to get Savile Row up to the 21st century. So they had this idea of forming an organisation called Savile Row Bespoke. They got 13 of the top tailors together. And then the idea was it's like marketing champagne, really. So you promote champagne, and you have all the houses, the Tattingers and the Moets. So you promote Savile Row to protect Savile Row, and then you have all the Anderson Sheppards and Huntsmans and Henry Pooles. So I had this amazing job. Andrew was just speaking to Anna. Anna was asking if he knew a photographer. I was shooting a story for a magazine, I can't remember which one, in Savile Row. Actually, it was quite an interesting story. It was the new and the old guard. So I was photographing Angus Cundey at Henry Poole, and I was photographing Brandelli at Kilgour as the young kind of buck. Anyway, I was just in the row with my camera and bumped into Andrew, and then he said he should speak to Anna. She's looking for a photographer. So I went round the next day and said, how can I help you? And she said, well, we need to do this huge website for the Savile Row. It will involve photographing every single tailor on the row. And I didn't believe it. It was like completely my dream come true. Because I love clothes, and I was far too scared to walk into a Savile Row tailor, and there's no way I could afford the clothes, particularly at the time. So the idea of actually being able to have carte blanche to walk into all the tailors was just incredible for me.
Hello, are you a fan of the pod? Are you a friend of the pod? Have you heard of our Patreon? Join the Blam Fam. You'll receive access to exclusive bonus pods, like our recent revisit with Sid Mashburn, our upcoming miniseries with Mr. Mort, and our community Slack group. You also get invites to members-only events and more. There is so much good stuff. But best of all, you're supporting the show. Head over to patreon.com/Blamo and join the Blam Fam. All right, we'll see you there.
Yeah, and also, I mean, you were taking pictures of everything that they
Absolutely,
were.
yeah. And I'd just gone digital as well. So I'd bought my first digital camera. So typically, when I was shooting fashion, I was spending £500 a day on film and processing. And all of a sudden, there was no expense at all. It was just my time.
Right.
So I had plenty of time because just got married and just got a house, and I wasn't traveling so much. So it ended up being 5 years' work. And I just went into all the tailors, photographed all the archives, just looked through everything, and they just left me alone with my camera. The idea which Anna liked when I was going into Savile Row to document it, and I was the first person really to present Savile Row to the public on this website. And I was working with this journalist, James Sherwood. So it was a fantastic job of saying, right, you've got to show the world what Savile Row is. And everyone's first impression is, really old, 200-year-old tailors, fusty, dusty. And I'd seen some other pictures photographing Savile Row, and it was all raked yellow light, bit of dust on the archives,
Right.
you know the kind of thing. And I thought, well, I love fashion and clothes and brightness, and I had a photographic style which was kind of using high saturated film and bright flash and things. So I thought, well, I'm just going to shoot Savile Row as if it's one of my fashion shoots with ring flash, bright lights, really make it zing and look amazing. So I was photographing everything with these kind of ring flashes, bright lights, very kind of high color, and everything just sang and jumped out. And all the old dusty Red Army uniforms, I shot them against other fabrics, and they just popped. And all the other fabrics I saw in the archive, suddenly they were really bright colors. When I shot them with the lights, you realized there was nothing fusty and dusty about old Savile Row at all. In fact, it was really fashion and colourful and amazing. So I couldn't get enough when I discovered that. And I was presenting my images to Andrew and everyone else, and they were going, "Wow, everything looks so so crisp and great. We love it." So I sort of hit on a good style that enabled them to all want me. So I ended up just getting work, photographing. So first thing was the website, and then we did a book with James Sherwood, and then on all the individual houses. There was a great girl. Have you met Poppy at Huntsman? She was.
I have
Poppy,
not.
She used to be at Huntsman. She was fantastic, and she was showing me their archives. They had a fantastic archive of photography as well, because they could afford all the best photographers at the time. They're hilarious pictures. Again, there was nothing kind of old-fashioned about them. They were just these modern-looking men in these ridiculously strong fashion poses with this great lighting. So I looked at those and thought, I can shoot modern Savile Row like that. So again, we got models and we shot brochures for them, and it was just having fun, really, making it look interesting and modern and crisp. So yeah, they loved all that.
And so this is where the true origin of Dashing Tweeds comes into play.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
So then I was looking at all the archives and thinking, I want something like this. These clothes are amazing. The cuts are amazing. The fabrics are fabulous. I went upstairs. Well, I struck a deal with the tailors because they said, "Look, we haven't got much money, but we can pay you in tailoring."
There you go.
Yeah. And I was speaking to them all. And there were 13 tailors with Savile Row Bespokes. And I thought, well, 13 Savile Row suits at $5,000 a pop, which I think they were then. That's not bad.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So I was quite pleased with the, my terms of payment. But I didn't want to have 13 grey navy suits. So
Makes sense.
I looked at the archives, went up to the front of house chaps and said, "Where are these fabrics? Can you show me your bunches?" And there was nothing there. They were just like literally just books and books and books of grey and navy for the city. And then I said, "What about the tweeds?" And the tweeds are just all the traditional shooting tweeds, which is the camouflage for the country. Just
right.
Green and that kind of lovety mix and browns, sludgy colours. Well, I mean, they are designed, traditional tweeds designed so that you're not noticed and don't scare away the birds or stags or whatever you're after.
Right,
so,
yeah, because tweed was a camouflage.
Yeah, it's
You're
camouflage.
Exactly right.
Yeah. I mean, some of the early tweeds, the lords would send their gillies up to the top of the mountain holding various tweeds up on the heather moors and see which ones disappeared. And then they would choose those ones as the most camouflaged ones.
Oh, wow.
I think that's the Love-It mix particularly. But anyway, in the archives were all these really brightly coloured fun things where young bucks were just enjoying themselves, and they had classic estate tweeds where people were wanting to especially all the kind of Victorian nouveau riche who were making money from the industrialisation. They were getting estates up there, commissioning really exciting tweeds, dressing all their estate staff in them, and having a lot of fun. But then none of those fabrics particularly existed. So I was looking around thinking, how can I get these fabrics that are more interesting? And also at the time, I'd throughout university, I just had my father's old Harris tweed jacket. It was a brown herringbone. And so
they're just like classic.
Just classic. I've been wearing it all the time. Bristol's so rainy. The first month, it just non-stop rained. So I had this Akubra hat, which I got in Australia when I was working on this sheep farm. And then some R.M. William boots, which I still love. I've got them now.
Yeah.
And my father's old tweed jacket. And I pretty much lived in that for 3 years at university. So I had this real love of just the cloth because it kept you warm. But then I was wearing the old tweed jacket in London and it just looked totally out of place. So now it got me thinking. I thought, well, hang on. Tweed's all about camouflage. It's about country camouflage and fitting in. What I'd really like is an urban tweed, like a camouflage for London. You pick the colours of the pavements and the yellow lines and the buildings, and wouldn't that be great? So I had this bubbling up in my mind, thinking that's what I really, really want. And then I was interested in science, in doing a science degree, thinking maybe I could put some bit of tech and stuff in it as well. So I was just thinking of all this, and then I was photographing the archives, and I was realising that Savile Row had a lot more to offer than I had perceived it to have. I thought it was very traditional in a boring way. But So I was thinking, oh, hang on, there must be some way of getting this fabric. And I was looking around. At the time, I also had my photographic studio, and I was looking for people to photograph in London and work with. And I thought to myself, it'd be great to find a stylist, an independent stylist, to work with, where I could create my own visions. So I was going to the art shows. I went to the Royal College of Art show and other degree shows, just looking for any creatives who would be on the same wavelength as me. And I walked into the Royal College of Art, and there was this fridge flowing with fabric coming out and just bright colours and amazing patterns. And Kirsty wasn't there at the time. It was a girl next door. I think I was wearing a Kenzo suit. I remember a really
Kenzo. There you go.
Yeah, a Kenzo printed linen suit, which I'd bought in a sale, which I loved. Anyway, I left a message, and the next day Kirsty got a message from her friend saying, a man in a crazy suit said he loves your fabrics and wants to work with you. So,
that's awesome.
So then I met Kirsty, and I said, I've got this great idea. I love all your fabrics. Can we use some of them for a shoot? Because I want to shoot some more of my own sort of fashion and like the Savile Row stuff. And maybe you've got some fabrics I could get something tailored out of. And she said, well, I haven't got any fabrics for you to wear, but maybe I could make one. I said, well, I love this one that you've just designed. And it was like a chevron with exciting purple and yellow, and it was elegant. It sounds, all these colours, it's hard to describe how elegant it was. Anyway, she said, well, I'll tell you what, I'll speak to the instructor, the technician at the Royal College, and maybe he'll let me do a bit of work and I can create this fabric for you. So then she created a little swatch, and she said, look, we have to get it woven properly, but I'll find a mill up in Scotland. So she did a bit of research, found a yarn dealer and a mill in Scotland. And then I said, great, let's weave this fabric. So I had this great idea, had this fabric woven, took it to a tailor, had a cycling suit made, because that's what I really wanted to look great on my bicycle. So I was looking at the old designs in Savile Row and realizing everything was about form and function. Menswear is all technical, even historically. So I had a pair of plus fours made, which, in retrospect, they looked a bit sort of vintage and Tintin, but in my mind, they were very kind of modern because they were designed especially for riding on my bicycle. Anyway, I love this suit. It was just absolutely fantastic. And the tailors enjoyed making it because they understood where I was coming from, and it was obviously, a true bespoke piece. Yeah. And that was the beginning. Yeah. Then I just became addicted and thought, hang on, I'm onto something here. There's definitely a desire for this. I'm sure I can persuade other people that they may like it if I can just weave some more fabric. So my business plan was you had to have 60 meters of fabric woven. So I thought, if I can weave 60 meters of fabric, I can keep 5 or 6 for myself, and then I can sell the rest.
Oh, there you go.
That was the business plan. And then I had this idea of the urban tweeds. So I said to Kirsty, I'll go around chipping up yellow pavements and picking up stones and colour sampling London, and then we can use that for a design for a new urban tweed. And Kirsty said, yeah, great. But I've left the Royal College. I can't do any more work on the looms.
Right.
I said, so I was a bit downhearted because I was so excited with this first tweed. And then I said, what happens if I buy you a loom? I was kind of so obsessed by this idea. She said, that'd be absolutely great. It's my dream. I said, what would you like? She said, I'd like this special made Swiss arm loom. And I said, how much are they? She said, about 10 grand. Thought, that's a lot of money. But it's manageable. My career as a photographer been good. Let's do it and buy it, and we'll put it in your front room. She was sharing like a student house.
Oh my gosh!
And she was obviously really excited to get this loom, which is her dream. And she was happy to speak to her flatmates and said, "Do you mind if there's a loom sitting in the corner of the room?" Anyway, so we got the loom, and then had this idea of this urban tweed. And then I thought, hang on, I'm going to be cycling around in London in it. And then, actually, no, that was right. I had my first suit made, which was for cycling around. And then my wife said, you're about to become a dad. I don't want you to be run over. You've got to wear this bright yellow reflective high-vis vest. Yeah. So I was cycling around town.
You're like, but I got my cool tweed jacket.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to ruin my look. I'd rather be looking good and dead. Anyway, it gave me an idea. I thought, hang on, why can't I weave some of this reflective threads in with the fabric. So I spoke to Kirsty and said, do you think we could weave reflective threads in and then make a kind of urban tweed that lights up when car headlights hit you on a bicycle? And she said, yeah, I'm sure. Did a bit of research. We found some of this thread by 3M and took it up to the mills in Scotland. They didn't like using it, but they persevered. He was still is a fantastic weaver, Robbie Trussler. Anyway, so we had this reflective threads, this reflective tweed came back, and I was just beside myself with excitement and had another suit made, and thought this is the best thing ever. We need to find a brand name together, Kirsty and I, and we can sell tons and tons of it. I'm going to become rich and famous instantly. This is just the best idea ever. So we sat in Kirsty's kitchen thinking of kind of names, and she was thinking, on a crest of a weave, she was saying. That's not a great name. And I was thinking about the ones, I was thinking, well, everyone's heard of tweed. It's an iconic fabric, and I want to modernize it. And I'm always dashing around on my bicycle, and dashing with a reflective is a bit like flashing. And, let's call it Dashing Tweeds. And she said, okay then. So I spoke to a friend of mine who was a fantastic calligrapher called Betty Saldy. And she was actually doing some identity for Fortnum Masons at the time.
Oh, wow.
Anyway, so she helped. I had this great idea, and it was all very futuristic and it's slightly exaggerated. And she said, if you want to have a brand that's really going to last, you've got to have this elegant typeface. They designed this very kind of toned down. Well, you can see it here.
Yeah.
They had tons of this work, and all the dashingness ended up just being that little flick on the D. That was all that was what graphic designers do.
Yeah.
They distill everything into one little tiny little extra, like a eyelash ident. Well, actually, it's almost like a bit of a Nike kind of thing, isn't it? With a little go faster.
Yeah.
Anyway, so then as soon as you get your name written, the name of the brand written in print, it's pretty exciting. So then I had a brand.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I mean, it's funny, because when you first came out with, because I remember I saw you were written on someone's blog, and you were this, and there was like a little video, maybe I can find it, but this was super early, maybe 2008, 9.
Yeah, I think that's right at the beginning.
Yeah, and there was a video of you biking around, and it was about the reflective material and the tweeds, but what you were doing is probably the most true reflection of why tweed was created anyway, because I mean, tweed, like you were saying, it was a camouflage, it was a performance fabric.
Yeah, it's the original sportswear. If you look at any English gentleman, Kirsty's always reminding me they're Scottish as well. So, any English or
British
Scottish or British,
yeah,
British, exactly. They were any sport they were doing, whether it was hunting, shooting, fishing, or early motoring, or early cycling, or anything. It was in tweed. Climbing Everest, it was done in tweed.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh wow, Edmund Hillary rolling up in tweed.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's even now that New Zealand brand Icebreaker with the fine merino base layers. The top athletes are using it for endurance climbing.
Yeah.
So So I mean, wool hasn't really ever been bettered for a lot of high performance things.
Yeah.
So tweed is the original sportswear. So exactly. So the idea of modernizing it is not as crazy as you think.
No, not at all. I mean, and I think and this is where I remember seeing like the designs that you had, and like for me, my idea of tweed, it was still very new and foreign to me, and so I just thought like, oh, I don't know, like maybe a British person that's hunting or something like that. But you had it, because did you help start the Tweed Run?
Yeah. So at the time, I was just on my own little. I mean, you may have guessed, talking so far, I've just got this own creative bubble, and just anything I'm passionate about, I just sort of pursue with personal interest.
You're an evangelist. That's all right. That's great.
And so I was just on my own little world. And all of a sudden, I was actually also in my, going back a few years, I was working as a bicycle courier, just to earn some money.
Okay.
They were cool times. It was, again, it really dates you. It was before any computers and things. There were a few fax machines, but if a bit of paper wanted to be taken from the West End to the City of London, it was done on bicycle couriers. And there were rows and rows and rows of bicycle couriers. And I would, you just pitch up to a company, they give you a radio and a bag. I think I worked for a company called Just in a Tick. And And then you were off bicycle couriering, and then there was a real scene of these kind of people on bikes, and there's some on fixed wheel bikes, which were just I think they came from New York, actually, the first idea of people riding fixies. So yeah, there was this proper kind of scene, and I was on the fringes of it. I'd been on my way back from Australia. I went via Bali and bought some crazy batik clothes and had some pink Converse. And it was the kind of beginning of rave, or in the middle of rave. So there was so much colour around. It was just such fun times. Yeah, it was a colourful, fun time, and cycling was like a really big thing. So I was on the edge of that community, and then jump a few years to when I created the Reflective Tweed. I was aware that there was this kind of still this kind of hub of couriers racing each other, and forming these little kind of different clubs. And so one chap called Ted, he'd got together with his friends and formed this Tweed Run, and it was a lot of humour in it because that was towards the end of the rave scene,
right?
And then everyone had been, massive warehouse parties, wearing crazy clothes and having a really, really good time, and that had sort of come to an end. And then people were looking around for the next thing, and they discovered vintage shops and heritage clothes, and people were starting to wear old tweed jackets and reinvent the gentleman. And another friend of mine, Ian Bruce, had invented, or a lot of people had this brilliant band called The Correspondents, and was doing what the genre's called now. He was mixing hip hop and dance music up with 20s electro swing. Yeah,
okay.
So it was that electro swing scene was happening around the East End of London, and people were cycling around. So that was kind of brewing, and I guess I was aware of it and on my own little bubble. But all of a sudden, everything converged. This chap Ted organised this thing called the Tweed Run, so people were then rediscovering the joy of vintage clothes. And cycling, and some people were from the courier, like hardcore couriers, and some people were just cycling like I was because it was the easiest way to get around London. And they all met in Berkeley Square, Hanover Square, actually, just outside Vogue. I remember the first one. There were about sort of 50 or 60 of us, and I heard about it and just pitched up. And it was a real scene. And suddenly I realized that there were loads of other people with the same mindset. And that's what always happens, isn't it? You get you think you're in your own creative bubble, and you realize other people in the creative bubble, and then you're part of a scene. So that was great fun. So then everyone said, "Hey, I love the tweeds you're wearing. These are not like old vintage tweeds. These look really modern and fresh, and some of them are reflective. That's amazing." So then I had quite a big market, a niche market of people who really liked what I was doing and wanted bits of them. And to help the marketing, I gave free sashes to Ted, so all the people leading the Tweed Run were wearing Dashing Tweeds. So I was becoming the first sponsor of the Tweed Run.
Oh, that's huge.
Yeah. So that was really good fun. And that just grew and grew and grew, and more people. There were two things going on with the Tweed Run. I think people were suddenly realizing that real clothes had a lot to offer. And people were really, really exploring how much, against the form and function, how technical old clothes were. And everything that I'd been discovering it through Savile Row. Even the tailors even had wooden horses for people to sit on when they were getting their riding breeches made. And the cut of the riding breeches were on a special circle on some of them, so that the seams were really comfortable. Levi were doing twisted jeans, and I thought that this cut of the Levi's twisted jeans was just the same as riding breeches, and there's nothing new about it. And then you think, hang on, how did they come about with these solutions? And they were looking for ways to make the clothing more comfortable in different environments. And so I was discovering all that form and function of clothes, especially with the military wear. And then other people, all the kind of ravers, were buying vintage tweeds because tweed lasts so well. So that was one of the few things you could always pick up in the charity shop. And enjoying the fact they're all dressed up, looking elegant. And then there was another scene happening. There was a magazine called the Chap magazine, which was also relishing this idea of looking like an old gentleman. But there was a lot of humour to it. The idea is that you weren't an out-of-work actor. You were a resting gentleman, and your butler had his day off. That was the kind of humour of the whole thing. And so you were just in bed, and you had to cook kippers in your Corby trouser press. There were these funny articles about how to survive without your butler. It was I got a lot of irony and humour in that scene. But that tied up with the Tweed Run, which is never, it's not serious, but it was just it
Sure, yeah.
was the same kind of party people.
It was a community too. It was a
community
really
of like-minded people.
Yeah, because then you're full-fledged brand. Like you're not a guy who is excited by something and wanted to see a project through. You're an actual brand and a business, and now you have people buying fabrics that you and your partner designed. Like
we had a few fabrics all in anything I particularly wanted at the time, and I was inspired by Kirsty. Then I spoke to Kirsty, and we kind of went over the fabrics. There wasn't much rhyme or reason. There wasn't a collection. It was just a random collection of fabrics that I was thinking of, and the reflectives. But then I was very keen on the marketing, so I was using all my contacts in photography to grow the brand. And I had this friend of mine who I used to style with on Quintessentially magazine called Kimvara Balfour, and she was very well connected. An Earl's daughter who kind of, you're in that whole kind of scene that I was photographing in. When I was working for Country Life and those magazines. And she wrote for this online magazine called Daily Candy. And she said, if I write about your new brand, Dashing Tweeds, you better be ready because the phone's never going to stop ringing. So I said, right, I'm ready. Will you please write about me? So she wrote a little piece and nothing happened at all. But then literally about a month later, I was on holiday and my phone rang, and it was Converse, rang from Boston, and they wanted to request samples because they'd read about it and they loved the idea of updating tweed.
Right.
And so I sent them some samples, thinking nothing of it. And then they called me up saying, we love what you're doing. Can we come and see your headquarters? We really want to do a collaboration with you. So that was the beginning of the brand really becoming serious.
Yeah, because you made what, like 30,000 pairs?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, it was crazy. So they came over. They were staying in a smart hotel. I had a slightly bashed up Volvo, which I picked them up at, and I could tell they weren't kind of quite sure what. And I was dressed in this kind of crazy, colourful tweed suit, which they liked. And picked them up in this old car, and I said, we're going to our design studio. Kirsty lived in a little terraced house with some other people in the East End in, what's the area called?
Hackney.
Hackney, just past Hackney. Anyway, Dalston.
Oh, Dalston,
yeah. Just was quite edgy at the time. It's now totally like mainstream.
Yeah, it's kind of hipster.
yeah. So I took them there, and they were pretty bemused when they just saw this little loom in Kirsty's front room. But they loved it. They saw the genuine passion Kirsty and I had for the fabrics, and then I drove them up to Scotland to see the mills, and they realised there was proper production behind it. At that time, we'd produced quite a few hundreds of meters of fabric, and the mills were getting happier to help us because they could see that it wasn't just a one-off thing. There was some longevity here. So then they placed an order for actually it was a bit of a process because they kept on testing us out with bigger and bigger amounts. But I ended up with 30,000 pairs of co-branded shoes, which is Converse. Amazing.
Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah. So I had that and the Tweed Run people. And
then you also collaborated with at least in America, probably one of the biggest, most fashionable guys with Billionaire Boys Club.
Yeah, absolutely.
Pharrell.
Yeah. Because he was Naigu and Pharrell. They were Savile Row was really doing well at this time.
Yeah,
and I'd been helping to market Savile Row. We were having so much fun. They were putting on these big shows. James Sherwood was putting on this London Cut show. Everyone was suddenly noticing that Savile Row had a lot to offer. It was attracting all these people like the Billionaires Boys Club. Everyone was looking around things. And then I was there wearing my tweeds that the tailors had been making. And there were parties all the time. It was, it was really exciting. So then they saw what I was doing. And I said, look, it's very simple. That's a nice thing, I think, all along about dashing. It's just such a simple idea. I'm just saying I'm modernizing classic tweed. Making it urban and exploring color and texture. So you could say what the brand was about instantly. And they said, I really like that idea. Can I see some of the fabrics? Can you develop something for us? So we developed some fabrics for them and did a collaboration. Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was huge. I remember seeing it.
Yeah, so that was really exciting. And then I thought, well, the ball's starting to roll. I might as well open the shop. So I was looking around. I wanted to be close to all my friends in Savile Row. So I found this little hairdresser that had gone bust, tiny shop. And then, spoke to the landlords, got a lease and moved into the shop thinking, right, this is really it. I'm going to fill it with all my tweeds, make a few clothes, and it's going to be fantastic. So I remember taking, I think it was a Easter holiday or something. Everyone had gone away and I stayed on my own just to polish the floors and I was painting it all myself. It was all very kind of small scale, and then created actually, I was really into making things and welding at that time. That was a new hobby. So I had a TIG welder I'd just bought. So I welded up this hanging sculpture with welding up stainless steel chains. So they all quite subtly welded. So it looked like they were just like Gaudi. They were making those curves that just would hang on their own, but upside down. So they looked quite magical and hung clothes off them.
Oh my God.
Although it did keep collapsing. It wasn't that well made, but it looked quite impressive.
So
anyway, so I opened the door and then thought that as soon as I have a shop with Dashing Tweeds written above it, then everyone would come in, and then nothing happened at all. That was a real learning curve.
So so what do you do when that happens? Because you're so positive, you're so happy, and it sounds like you definitely hit a wall a few times. I mean, what told you to keep going?
Yeah, well, that was quite depressing. So you opened it, you've had a bit of success, and you've got people buying your fabrics, and then suddenly you've got this shop full of stuff, and you're just actually growing up. I've always thrown parties. I just love having parties, and I remember going to a friend's party. Actually, my parties were always a great success. Everyone turned up, and they were fantastic, and then you have a taste for more of them. I remember going once to invite to a friend's party, and there was no one there, and it was like the nightmare scenario. I said, "Where are all your friends?" This is way back at sixth form at school, and he said he wasn't the coolest kid, but a few weeks before, his parents were away, and all the cool kids said, "Let's go to this person's house. All the parents are away. Let's have a wild party."
Right.
He thought he'd try and repeat it, and no one turned up, and it was him. I was a friend of his. He was a bit of a science geek like me at the time, and he was in tears. Anyway, he was obviously scarred for life.
Yeah.
But I found it quite scarring. So my worst nightmare was throwing a party and no one turning up, and then the shop was a bit like that. You sort of opening the door to begin with. And no one was coming in. So then I suddenly realized you've got to do so much more marketing and get the message out to people before it makes sense for them. I mean, a few fans came in, but that was a real learning curve. And I just taken on this shop with a minimum few years rents to pay. So that was a real moment of keeping faith. And then that's when Holly appeared. She had appeared a bit before to help me, and she had this incredibly clear vision. Just thinking, right, what you need to do is have a proper plan, because up until that time, I've been riding this wave,
right? Reacting to stuff over.
Yeah, reacting to stuff, just going along with the ride. The whole of Savile Row was on the up, and I was part of the whole party because I was creating all the images for it.
Yeah,
and getting paid, getting tailoring, and I was selling some of the cloths I'd made. I'd done the Converse thing, and suddenly I had this shop, and then no one turned up. So it was a real learning curve.
Yeah, sounds like you started a podcast.
Yeah, that's what I needed actually. And then also I'd run out of favours with all my friends who I would been photographing for in the magazines, because when I'd been working for them, they said, "Yeah, it's great that you're not doing so much commercial photography with magazines, but we'll run a little article for you." So
yeah,
I had the cover of the Sunday Times Style, which was really great.
That's huge.
Yeah, which is huge. And some other things, some other friends. And that had been and gone. So then I was left in my shop, and I thought, my God, what's the next stage?
Oh my God.
Yeah, that's the beginning of a quite interesting time when thinking about what is it you want the brand to become, who are the customers, how many people like dressing up in crazy, colourful tweeds like me, where are they, who are they? It's a really interesting exercise. I mean, it's for anyone wanting to create a brand, thinking about who their customers are.
Yeah.
So, and I hadn't really done that before. I'd just been thinking about what I wanted. So that was a whole new process, really.
So what happened, and what was the bigger turning point when that happens?
Well, it's still happening, and now we've moved into a bigger shop, and we're just starting to do really well. So it's easier to sort of talk about what's happening now. We've got an agent in Japan, which is fantastic. We've got 2 agents in Europe. We've been doing loads of got in with the costume design world as well. So we've been doing stuff for lots of major Disney and Warner Brothers films.
I think that's one of the, for me, like the most interesting things about your brand is when I think about, in my mind, unfortunately, like the capital B brand is that makes clothes, has a style, has a model, has a fit, but you're making fabrics which can be interpreted on upholstery. It can be interpreted for pillows. It can be interpreted clothing is just one of the tons of other ways, and then how that clothing is made can be done too.
Fabric for different purposes. I also was learning a lot about how fabric's produced, because I didn't really know about it. But there's different finishes required for different uses.
Okay.
So we have had we've covered our furniture in the shop in our Tweed. It looks fantastic.
Yeah.
And we've done a few bespoke jobs for other. My brother has an architectural company which we've worked with before. And then I was realizing that the thing to do was to look for people, it sounds obvious, who actually like what we're doing, rather than try and modify the brand that I was creating. Because the temptation when you're speaking to people and other business people is to say, your vision's a bit extreme, or it's a bit too, it's very exploratory, we love it, but why don't you tone it down and make it more commercial, which is diluting the concept of what you're trying to do. But there's a lot of temptation to try and drag you to the norm. That's what everyone tries to do, is take you into the middle, saying, I really appreciate that you're at this sort of strange, not strange, but kind of niche aspect that you're exploring. But wouldn't it be better if you just did things in a more normal way? And then you scratch your head and thinking, maybe I should become more commercial. So we tried for a couple of times just making some what we thought were more commercial cloths, and no one was interested in them. And then I thought, sod that, let's just do things I really like this wild check coat.
It's just beautiful, by the way. Really, really beautiful.
And then we put that in the window, and then more and more people bought that. So you actually realize that if you stick to your guns, I'm no business guru, but it just seems to be, if you've got passion and you can show it and stick to it, then you'll find people. So that ended up selling really well. And then we ended up getting, as I was saying, men are like sheep. So there are a few early adopters, but once the early adopters buy things, and then obviously I was starting to, social media really just started when I was starting with Savile Row. So I was starting to explore all that social media and realizing that all the old model of working with magazines and advertising was changing. You start jumping on that bandwagon, and then you realize it's a fantastic way of getting to these new markets.
Yeah.
But I do feel actually there's an interesting time at the moment, and men are looking around and thinking what is new. And colour was so popular. Everyone's heard of Beau Brummell as being a fantastic dandy. What people don't realise, his contribution was making men wear black and white. It was all about getting immaculate cuts. Before that, men were wearing a lot more colours, and that was 200 years ago. So there's been 200 years of kind of colour draining out of menswear. Obviously, there are peaks and troughs, but I think now it's quite an interesting time, and people definitely notice at the menswear show at Petit Woma I went to last week. There's more colour around. So so exploration of colour is now piquing people's interest.
Yeah, well, I think that's also the thing too, in that people are right now we're in this situation where everything is okay. No matter what, it's just you need to be confident in what you're wearing. So you can dress any way you want. You can, have one style suit, or you can wear workwear. You can wear Italian tailoring or whatever that is. It's just be confident in what you're doing. And I think in a lot of ways that mass validation has made it okay for people to explore, because it's like, oh, look, it's really more about my mindset of who I am and what I believe in. I can wear anything. Yeah, maybe I'll try this.
That is true. But then throughout any creative process, I've found that boundaries actually are the most helpful thing, because you've got a space to explore in. So when you've got no boundary and you can walk down the street in ripped jeans and paint splattered t-shirt, then it's harder for people to. Oh, and you can look at heritage, vintage things. You get a lot of people dressed up in immaculate shirts and suits and ties, thinking that they're from the Edwardian period. But then it's harder for people to because there's no boundary for them.
They want to be able to understand you.
Yeah. Just personally, if you're just thinking, what should be my style? Going back to when I was a young teenager, thinking what were my influences, and it wasn't such a scruffy time, and people were still wearing. My grandmother was always saying that when she was younger, you couldn't leave the house without gloves and a hat. Let alone, obviously everyone wearing pinstripe suits and bowler hats in the city. But even when I was growing up in the 70s, there was still more people wearing suits and more formal clothes. And now it's just got so informal. It is difficult for people to to try and latch on to different trends, I think, because they don't have to. Whereas I do feel when you're going out, if you're going to the opera and you see people who are badly dressed, it does ruin
No, I agree with that.
The sense of occasion. And I think if people are given by society, if they say, okay, you have to wear certain clothes to fit in, then you can experiment with different cuts of jackets and suits. But I do think it gives people more confidence to experiment. And obviously punk was pushing against the boundaries of the status quo at the time and creating something incredibly interesting. And they were using tweed to be rebellious.
Oh yeah, the whole Vivienne Westwood and Sex Pistols.
Exactly, because tweed was the most conservative fabric worn by the sort of lords in the House of Lords. And so by ripping tweed up or putting it with zips and safety pins, they were being, as anarchic as they could, which is obviously the whole point of the Sex Pistols. But without the boundaries of the society, then it's quite hard to be anarchic. And now you haven't got the sort of boundaries of having to wear a hat and gloves and coats and ties and everything outside. You can't rebel anymore into being less dressed.
Right.
So you don't see. I went to this trade show yesterday when I was up here. It was a streetwear thing. There's nothing interesting. It's just jeans and t-shirts. It wasn't like punk stuff, or you know what I mean. It wasn't anything.
Right.
There was no statement. I couldn't see any statements that people were having a passion, going, "Yeah, let's be anarchic." Or
I'm sure many silently agree with you.
Or maybe anarchic is then dressing up in bow ties, and obviously that's a trend as well.
Yeah.
So I think in a way it's more difficult. So the whole point of Dashing Tweeds, we're giving people a framework in which to. That's what I like to think. You come to the shop, you see our styles. We're playing with tailoring. I've been working with students in the past, doing things like very creative clothes based on 16th century armor. I like to think of a kind of tweed hero at the Tweed Run times as being a kind of modern day urban knight on their bicycle instead of their horse. And then the tweed is some sort of armor. So you're looking at old armor and then using that to explore. So it's giving yourselves a kind of framework to work in. And now I'm kind of really enjoying the wide leg trousers. The ones I'm wearing at the moment aren't very wide legs, but I've been doing these.
Oh, I've seen you in far wider legs.
Yeah, these really wide legs.
Yeah.
And then looking at history of wide leg trousers from the sort of 20s when they first came in, the Oxford bags, and then the 70s. They go into a 20-year cycle, 50s. There was this flare-lined suits in the 70s. So it's kind of interesting, the ebbs and flows of fashion, but within the remit of tailoring, I found quite interesting because tailoring gives the the edge, the boundaries to explore in. So, I'm interested in.
No, that's fantastic
in doing that.
Guy, this has been a really, really wonderful conversation, and I mean it's been great to hear about the retail store and then how so much of this birth. As we're starting to wrap up, is there any other stuff you'd like to add or mention that we should plug or feature?
Oh yeah, we'll definitely plug. We've got a fantastic shop in Marylebone, just off Chiltern Street, which is really good. We're doing collections twice a year, so we've got a fabulous spring-summer collection out now. And autumn-winter collections. We're constantly creating new collections. We've now got a totally stock-supported bunch of all our classic designs, which we've created for the last 10 years, which are selling really well. So my plug is just to come to the shop, and even if you don't think you may like what we're doing, just come and have a look with an open mind.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it is really, really beautiful stuff. Well, Guy, thank you so much. It was an absolute pleasure chatting with you. All right, talk to you soon.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.
You've been listening to Blamo. Our theme music is by Breakmaster Cylinder, editing by Brendan Finn, and we're produced by Blamo Media. Follow along with us on Instagram at Blamo Podcast and leave a review for us on your favorite podcast app. Want even more Blamo? Head over to the Patreon at patreon.com/Blamo to join the Blam fam and get access to additional interviews, our community Slack, special events, and more. Thanks again. We'll see you next week.